what I'm going to do is, I have the way I kind of made the presentation is really break it up into those three parts. So I'm going to kind of fight through that first part, since pretty much everybody knows about attribution. Spend a little time for the folks here who want to really start thinking about implementing attribution, and we spend a little more time at the end on some of the advanced things even we are trying to do, and maybe you are. So, basically before we talk about attribution, basically there are a couple of trends that are driving things today. One is there is an increasing need for accountability, especially in marketing, from CMOs, CEOs, even high-level execs. They want to really know more concretely how the money is being spent, what are we getting in return, what went wrong, what didn't go wrong, if we have additional funds for investment, how can it be best invested, and more than ever before, there is a greater request coming from top down. So what that is happening is you have more people asking the analysts or the analytical team for analysis, inputs, insights, reports, and that really increases the workload in some ways. And the second thing is this trend in big data. Some of the folks talked about that earlier today. I'm going to briefly touch on that and just to bring these two together and why that is driving something like attribution. Now, in terms of big data, I always say, I'm not going to go into detail. Like I said, that's a whole session in itself. You must have, I just put these things because you must have heard all these things mentioned. People defining it as the number of bytes produced a day, the different dimensions of big data, and what is worth, what is not worth, and things like that. But I think the key thing to remember, and the definition I like, is more from a customer perspective, and it's really nothing but the manifestation of the interactions that customers have with your company and the explosion in those interactions. That's really what is. If you look at fundamentally what is driving big data, it's those interactions. And now we have more channels, whether it is social or mobile or web, doesn't matter. And within those channels, you have multiple touch points. So every time somebody is interacting, there is, you're creating data. And that has implications for us as an analyst and for marketing in general and for the company as a whole. Even for us, that's sensitive. We create, FedEx creates millions and millions of monthly transactions from these various touch points. So, if you look at it, if you really have to analyze something like this, you can't do it the old-fashioned way. That's the fundamental thing today. Because of this quote-unquote big data, you have to come out with creative ways, creative technologies, and creative use of analytics to really come out with insights. And what I'm going to show, is some of the ways we can tackle big data and where attribution fits in. Because most of the time, as an analyst, you feel like this, or you feel like you have people chasing you for things. And if you start doing things manually, or if you start doing things the way we used to do before, you're going to be overburdened, and you're going to never accomplish the things you want to do. Going back to, I think, Avinash's talk, you don't want to be spending time poring over numbers. You don't want to be spending time reporting. You don't want to be spending time collecting data, capturing data. You really want to, get over that and really do analysis. And so really there are three things which helps you do that. Or there are three things you have to keep in mind which will help you do that. One is you need machines. And I say machines, that's a very generic term. Essentially what that means is you need technology. It doesn't matter whether it is web technology or some kind of programming, like natural language processing, whatever. It doesn't have to be high or low. Essentially you need, depending on your goal, there is no one answer, depending on your goal and what you're trying to do, you need technology, because you want to reduce that manual intervention, number one. Number two, because of the multidimensional nature of some of the channels, there's only so much we can process. In fact, I take even one step further. There are a lot of technologies, even they cannot process the kind of dimensions and the amount of data that's coming in and the amount of aggregation that is needed. So in terms of data curation, so to speak, you have to be creative, and this is where, again, this is a whole different talk. Institutions like MIT, they have some really, they are working on this, and they have some really cool way of visualizing data. Again, going back to Avinash's thing, visualization is very important. They have, if some of you want to check, Google or things like that, they have a project called Data Wrangler. There's another one called MapD. Essentially what it does is, MapD is for understanding Twitter feed. If you look at Twitter, I think it produces something like, I forgot the number, 500 million tweets a day. I forgot that, don't quote me on that, but it's a crazy amount of tweets a day. So you can't, if you want to get insights from it, you can't just analyze it based on the normal way of doing things. You need to actually, have a visual way of doing things. So that's where something like this comes. And then you have time. Time meaning that you want things fast, you want things when it's needed, you want things when you want to make a decision. You want the insights, not a month later. You don't want something after you have made a decision, so you want it in a timely fashion. So these three things are what is driving some of the things we are doing now. And like I said, there are many things we can talk about. Attribution is one of those things which we are doing to make sense of that data in a timely fashion. And essentially what that is, and again, a couple of people have talked about it and everybody knows about it, essentially assigning proper credits. It's essentially recalibrating your channels and the impact of those channels and the value of those channels. That's what attribution is. Now, moving fast, quickly, people do last click. I'm not going to talk about it. Like Avinash said, it's crazy, it's stupid, and why it is, and it's unfair. It's very similar to Olympic relay team. If they win the gold medal and if only one person gets the gold medal, so to speak, it is not fair and it doesn't make sense. That's exactly what last click is. You have multiple channels contributing to a conversion or some behavior, and you're only giving credit to one channel. There are many other ways of doing attribution. Again, this is, I just put it in there because, like I said, I didn't know what the make of the audience was, because in some presentations I've given, there were a lot more people who were wanting basics. So essentially, you have last click, you have first click, you have equal weighting. Essentially, you give all channels equal weighting. Then you have, time lapse. Essentially, depending on how far beyond the conversion a channel is, you give it less and less weightage, U-shape, inverted U, and all kinds of stuff. And the very last one there at the bottom is algorithmic. Essentially, what that is you use statistics and machine learning. So in all the others, it's in some way subjective, because you determine what the weight should be for the channel. In the very last one, you collect the data, and you let the data determine what the weight should be for each of those channels. And I'm going to skip over this. Again, like I said, since most of you know what attribution is, tons of benefits, and even from our own studies, we have found out that there are pretty much a lot of benefit to doing attribution, meaning that if you were to spend money just using no optimization or last click optimization, the return you get is far less than if you were to use something like an attribution model to invest money. Now, going to the second stage, for those of you who know what attribution is and who wants to get into attribution, I just want to spend about 10 minutes here. You don't want to jump into attribution without thinking, because what's going to happen, and I'm telling also from experience, is that you jump in, you say that, okay, these are our conversions, these are the channels, and we're going to create a model. So what's going to happen a lot of times is you have channels like display and social. Now, traditionally, they are upper funnel channels. Essentially, what it means is that they play a bigger role in driving traffic, in awareness, and engagement, things like that, and a lesser role in the actual sale or conversion. So if you don't think of your, what you want to be conversions and what you want to track and how you want to weigh things and which channels you should consider, what's going to happen is you're going to start from the wrong foot with some of the channels and channel owners. And as we go along, I'll tell you why that is going to be doomed for failure, because if you don't have the buy-in from the various folks, then it's never going to be an enterprise solution. And if it's not an enterprise solution, then this is not a marketing solution per se. You want for the entire company to adapt this and use this. So quickly going over, the first thing you want to be clear about is you want to be very clear about what your business objectives are, what your goals are, what you want to do. And you want to be very cognizant about your company culture, the knowledge of various stakeholders in terms of attribution and analytics in general. You want to be, you want to have a good discovery of your infrastructure, your technical capabilities, your, how you work with your IT teams. Essentially, you want to do a recon before you even start. That's, believe me, tremendously going to help you later when you want to actually execute the process. And then the other thing is, like I said here, contextual stuff. How much data do you have? I mean, it's one thing to be idealistic or dream about, hey, I want to tie all this A channel, B, C, D, E, mention 10 channels. But if you don't have the data from those channels, or if you have dirty data, then it's pointless to dream about it, right? I mean, you can dream all you want, but unless you have a decently clean data, unless you have some kind of key where you can link these, or unless you have a source. So those are the things you want to do. Clear vision, clear goals, and a recon or an assessment. The next thing you want to do actually is scope and bind, and this is absolutely critical. And I'm telling you, again from experience, you don't want to implement the process and then go sell to your stakeholders that this is what you have done and this is beneficial, you should use it. I'm telling you, if you do that, most likely they are just going to look at it, smile at it, nod at it, and that's about it. I mean, meaning that, you want the stakeholders to be in supporting you even before you start the process. And so one of the ways to do that is to start talking about it even while you're in the discovery phase. Talk about why it's critical, what you're trying to do, why it's going to be beneficial. And remember, I mean, I don't know about your organizations. In many organizations, the different channels are owned by different people. And the budgets are different. So what's going to happen is that, at the end of the day, one of the goals of attribution is to dynamically shift media spend so that you can get the best bang for your bucks, right? I mean, let's say you're launching a campaign or launching an initiative, and you have X million in paid search or X million in display, etc. You want to monitor it, and you may see that, hey, you know what, this is working, this is not working. You want to, again, this is the end state, you want to shift the budget so that you increase the return from what is working and reduce the spend on what's not working. But for this to happen, the channel owners and the channel stakeholders really have to be in agreement that, hey, look, this is our ultimate goal, and we want to help the enterprise by optimizing the channel. Now, that's easier said than done because nobody wants to give up money, right? I mean, especially if you're owning dollars, who wants to just give up? As good as it may be for the company. So this is where it takes a long time, and this is also where, when you socialize, you shouldn't just do it with the marketing folks. You should do it with the finance folks, because they can be your staunch supporters, especially when you're starting to, really implement this. So you want them on board. You want to, make sure that you're socializing in other areas. Could be your brand. I don't know how you are structured, but your, communication folks. So you want to really, start to permeate that knowledge that we are moving in this direction, and at the end of the day, this is extremely beneficial. And it's going to take time. I always say that change in behavior, it's never discrete. It's not that, it doesn't matter what you're doing. That's the fundamental philosophy even in people when we are trying to cure addicts. Because if you have a behavior, one fine day you just don't decide to change and go to the next level. It's a gradual change, and so to really implement the change management, I think one of the speakers mentioned that, maybe hinted it, you really have to understand what their needs are, the motivation for what their motivations are, and what they want to achieve, and then really work on that. So that is one. And then implementation, it's actually working with people. Now, one thing here which people don't talk about, but I want to just touch on it, is creation of a good taxonomy. Now, what is a taxonomy? Taxonomy is really nothing but the attributes for each channel. And this is very critical if you want to do a good attribution. So, for example, if you're looking at display, you have the creative size, the placement, the frequency, and the publisher. Those are different elements. Paid search, same thing, whether it's branded, non-branded, keywords, all those kind of things. And why that is critical is, if you have a great taxonomy for each channel, and if you have a good naming convention for each channel, when you launch a campaign, you can follow that taxonomy. So what is going to happen, remember what I said about the whole big data kind of thing, is you really don't want to be doing this manually. So when it flows in, when the data flows in, you can have a system automatically parse things out. And and then when you do the attribution, not only can you see the impact of channels, you can actually see the impact at various levels. You can see what creative works with what, or what placement, publisher. I don't want to use the word, I do not normally use it, but you really, it's really good, meaning that you get a lot of insight from that. So that's really critical. And then the other thing you want to really be working towards is this. When you socialize, when you are working on these kind of things, it's not just your internal stakeholders that are critical. Your agency partners are equally critical. So if you're working with a display agency, or a paid search, if you're working with the agency, it's critical that you sell it to them and they understand the benefit, and they are also on board in terms of using it. Because at the end of the day, especially in a lot of companies, the channel owners really don't make the decision. They work with the agency, and it's the agency that makes a decision on how to spend the money. So if that's the case, you want the agency to be on board along with your channel owners, so that we are moving in the right direction. I'm also keeping one eye on the time, just because I just want to be on time. The other thing is, we talked about this, the whole thing about socialization, being on the, doing a roadshow with various things. And remember, this goes on for, not just at the beginning, you do this continuously at every stage. And the thing is also, you want to do it in, you want to do attribution in phases. Meaning that, I don't know, if you're one of those companies that has fantastic data in all channels, obviously you're different, but normally that's not the case. So what you want to do is you want to start with some of the channels where you do have good data. Maybe it's paid search and display. Maybe it's paid, display, direct, organic, or email. So you want to look at which channels you want to start with, and you want to execute it. See, I would rather execute things faster than try to, do an attribution for all the channels, and it takes 3 years to do it. You want to do things faster so that you can show some results. Once you start showing some results, you are going to have a much better support and encouragement in terms of going to the next level. And one of the things in this is testing. Testing is critical because, let's say you have an attribution process, it's theoretical unless you test it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you have data going in, you created the process, you have some recommendations in the process, but that's all just literally statistics and modeling. Where the rubber meets the road is you want to actually implement it in the market. So what that means is that you have, if you have a live campaign or a live initiative, you want to use actual dollars and, let's say, plan a test so that when you are launching the initiative, you have a period where you launch it with business as usual kind of optimization, meaning you do what you're always doing, and then for a period you want to do it based on what the attribution process recommended. And then you want to see the pre-post comparisons and various other things to see, did the attribution recommendation really make a difference in terms of the return and the CPA? CPA is the cost per conversion. I mean, technically, your CPA should have been going low with the attribution recommendation. And I mean, there are multiple things. One is either you can write down the cost. Number two is that for the same money, you should be getting more conversions, right? Or number three is you kind of, you're spending money on placements and publishers that are much more effective. I mean, I'm not going to tell how to design the test because, like I said, it's very contextual. But depending on your context, you can actually design a test in the actual market using real dollars, and that's where you can, that's where the aha moment is, because that's where the senior execs, when they see those, they really, you have the bulb going on, and they say, you know what, this makes sense. So you can then go to the next level. And then you have the enhancement expansion. Essentially, once you have it done for some channels, expanded to other channels and other business units and things like that. So this is really like a 10-minute on the implementation part. And we can, like I said, have a Q&A at the end. I just want to make sure I cover the three. So let's say that once you have a digital attribution process in your company, the thing is you want to keep on improving, right? So, and when I say improving, I'm not talking about obnoxious tagging, retagging kind of thing, but you actually want to improve the process. So one improvement to the digital attribution is to have top-down modeling which supports and enhances your digital attribution, so to speak. The digital attribution is bottom-up. Top-down is really, one way to look at it is media mix modeling. So essentially what that is, and I'm not going to talk about the statistical definition or anything like that, but essentially what media mix modeling, and you're going to hear media mix modeling, market mix modeling, marketing message mix modeling. The gist of all that is really using statistics and certain techniques to look at the impact of your current investment on future business KPIs. And the future business KPIs could be revenue, could be profitability, could be anything else. Now the one difference with that is that you are actually going to be looking at a lot of external factors also. In the bottom up, it's purely digital. So you're looking at data from, let's say, email, display, paid search, organic search, direct, and you're trying to, analyze it and see how much credit you should give each channel. In the top down, you look at all the channels, and that includes the digital, includes offline, like TV and print, and it includes factors like seasonality, or comparative information, economic factors, pricing. So essentially, you have a lot more data but it's at a higher level. It's not at a cookie level or aggregate. I mean, it's not at a granular level. It's at the aggregate level. And what you're trying to do, see, what top-down does is it bounds your allocation. So what that gives you is a sense of how much should you allocate for each channel going forward based on historic analysis and based on how much impact based on your prediction of how much impact those channels are going to have on future revenue. Once you have the allocation, what the bottom up allows you to do is, once you have a given amount of dollars, how can you best optimize your channels with that limited amount of dollars? So that's where the bottom up really helps. So the first one gives you a sense of how much you should allocate. The bottom up really gives you a sense of how then you should spend that allocation. So I mean, that's again one way of putting it. So that's one kind of enhancement. And again, the other thing is, I think people talked about, I think there were a couple of sessions also on cross-device. And this is really one of the things we are also trying to go into, meaning that you have your web, but that's really one part of it. Then you have all these mobile devices and iPads and all these other things. So ideally, your attribution process should be expanded to really do cross-device attribution, not web attribution, not just one particular, so to speak, touch point, but really across multiple devices. And in this case, I'm just going to show something else. It's not just about mobile or social. Within each of those, you can actually go much deeper. So this is just an example I just pulled. So for example, within social, you can have attribution that talks about impact of, the value of social compared to, let's say, display and paid and organic. But then within social, you have various content. And so you can actually take your attribution to the next level where you're actually looking at the value of each based on what the intent is and what was done within that channel. So that's really, again, a step which you can take going forward. And then, this is again another thing which people, I'm sure you must have heard about it, or is again a common thing. Nowadays, a lot of people talk about audience insights because everything is about audience. And I mean, there is a reason for that, meaning that at the end of the day, all said and done, everything you're doing is to really, in some ways, form or fashion, enrich the customer experience, satisfaction, so that you get more business. So from that perspective, the attribution you're doing is really just one part of it. I mean, again, the way eventually things will work out is once everything starts flowing, is you have, you have your bottom-up attribution, you have the top-down attribution, right? Then you want to integrate other information like demographic, firmographics, psychographic information. And what that is going to give you is, it actually is going to tell you what kind of media mix works best with which audience segment. If you want to target a certain audience segment, what are the touch points and creatives and placements, etc., that would work best there? Or if you have a certain goal in mind, which audience segment should you target for the best return, or for the most efficient, or what is the most efficient way to target an audience segment given so many dollars? I mean, you have all these questions which you can answer, not about the channel, but really about your customers or the people who actually use your product or service. And then, if you were to take the flip side of it, there's a whole bunch of analysis you can do by bringing in things like lifetime value and sales data and the CRM data into the mix. And it goes to predictive. I mean, this again, I'm not going to talk about it at all here, but this is really one of the most fascinating areas because you can do a lot of predictive analytics with the data you have and the attribution work. And when I say predictive analytics, you can look at one set of data and start to look at the correlation it has on various things, and you can start to build proxy stuff. And just to give an example, things like the digital channels are very easy to measure, but if you look at things like TV, store conversions, these are not easy to measure. And online to store time, this is again a challenge. So there are various things for which you cannot get an easy measurement, but once you start trying various things, you can actually come out with a good regression correlation model where, looking at the data you have, you can actually predict what is going to happen based on, let's say, if you're going to spend $1 million on TV, or based on the store spend and things like that. Like I said, that's a quick gist. Like, I think I have about 10 minutes. I just want to open it for just discussion. That's like I said, because they said 35 minutes. So.
Any questions? I have one right here.
For companies who have been using the last click methodology for some time, where do you see them moving as the next step, just to, in that progression, before you get to that big model? Where do you see companies going from last click?
Now, see, depends. Well, not hedging. It depends. When I say it depends, it really depends on the kind of data you have. Number one, the number of people you have working on this. Okay, and how much or how visionary your leaders are in terms of where they want to take it. Now, having said that, if I just have to scope out a path, I would say that last click is absolutely hopeless. So the next best thing would be do something like an equal weighting. At least look at all the channels you spend money in, and for every conversion, at least give all the channels some credit. Could be equal, or if you have better information, weight, things like that. So I would do something like that, where you at least bring in the other channels into the mix. I mean, that is some attribution. And then progress to see if you really want to, number one, do things in-house, or hire an agency or a vendor to start doing more complex stuff in terms of, the algorithmic stuff and things like that. I mean, again, like I said, not trying to hedge, but that would be my direct answer.
I was just wondering if, when you implemented the system for the first time that you're using, if you, like within the first few weeks, had a moment where you went, wow, I had no idea that retargeting is a ripoff, that email's doing, like, did you have a first big win?
No, we did, but not from a remarketing perspective, but, let's take display as an example. I mean, but could be for other channels too, but, we spend money with all these different publishers for things, but suddenly we find out, hey, you know what, this publisher is really not doing well overall. But then we saw, remember I talked about the taxonomy? We saw that, hey, look, for behavioral targeting, these publishers are doing fantastic. But then if it is contextual stuff, then they're not doing that well, it is somebody else. And, and again, in display, you have all kinds of stuff, homepage takeovers and this and that. So when we started looking at those kind of things, some of the correlations jumped up, which I didn't know existed before. Let me put it like that. And so it was from those kind of perspective, what worked, what didn't work. So I haven't, going back to the retargeting thing, I haven't really compared specifically remarketing, retargeting using attributions. Say that again, I didn't hear.
Yeah, it wasn't so much retargeting, I just picked it at random. I just.
Oh, yeah. No. So, there were aha moments, and like I said, specific to, we worked on it still. Paid search is next, but then let's go down to email. Okay, email, you really have to think about that taxonomy, because a lot of times people talk about delivers and opens and all that. That's really not taxonomy. That's really the kind of the back end. To me, taxonomy is within the email, you should be able to say, if you have an email with images and videos and things like that, you should be able to track those things so that at some point in time, you should be able to say, hey, you know what? This awareness email campaign worked, but of all these awareness campaigns, these images